The death of an older couple sets off a tragic chain of events that will cause Barnaby and Jones to uncover an unsolved case. Can they solve the case before Jones has to give the worst best man speech ever? No, they don't. We're talking weird, tragic endings.
The fascinating history of eminent domain.
Fascinating is doing a heavy lifting in that statement. And what the heck was going on at the Barnaby's wedding on this episode of
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show, Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me as always is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, Eric. Today we are talking about Left for Dead, the third episode of the 11th series. It originally aired July 20th, 2008. It was directed by Rennie Rye and written by Michael Crompton. Let's walk this one down the aisle.
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We will still be here when you get back.
If this isn't down by tomorrow night, I am set to lose 10 grand in overrun charges.
And what's going to happen when Alyssa's son comes back?
You still think Patrick's coming home after 19 years?
You remember it all then.
Oh, you could forget.
He's alive. Lynn can feel it.
Put me in the digger. I'll flatten a lot of them.
You're an evil man, Jack Purdy.
Tell me something I don't already know.
Lynn Fox rides through the village of Dunstan, trying to collect signatures on a petition to stop a construction project that is threatening the home of her friend Alyssa Bradley. But it's the home of Ron and Libby Wilson that gives her a bad feeling. Ignoring several no trespassing signs, Lynn peers in and sees Ron's body lying at the bottom of the stairs. Cue that theremin! Barnaby and Jones arrive as seemingly all of Costin PD investigate this crime scene. Coroner Bullock tells them that Ron died after being pushed down the stairs. They also find the body of Libby, who is dead from natural causes. The place looks ransacked, but if it was a robbery, why leave so many valuables behind? Lynn tells them that she knew something was wrong because she's psychic, and Barnaby doesn't even roll his eyes. She says the Wilsons' young son Michael died 20 years ago when he was run down by a car, and they have been recluses ever since. But if they are recluses, why is there a table set for 3 people? Lynn uses her psychic powers to predict that these won't be the last deaths. Are we sure she's psychic and not just watched this show before? Jones is familiar with Michael's death, as he grew up in the area and was only a couple years older. He's also very familiar with Charlotte Knight, the fill-in crime scene photographer. They're friends from childhood and are both taking part in the upcoming wedding of Mark Purdy and Louise, no last name apparently needed. In fact, both are attending the stag and hen nights happening that very evening. Mark seems like a nice guy and is a former cop, but his brother Jack is both the developer behind the construction project Lynn is protesting and also a colossal jerk. He has a nasty habit of attacking everyone, the protesters, Mark, even Louise, who also happens to be Jack's ex. After running into each other at the bowling alley, the two parties separate to different pubs. Jack sees Lynn and fellow protester Spud putting up flyers and goes after them. Later, while a stripper entertains Mark, Jack sends a secret text to Louise. Her head night is a little contentious because Jack's current wife Stacy is with them, and they can barely contain their dislike for each other. Louise also tells Charlotte that Mark and her are finally getting away from this damn village. Meanwhile, someone is watching all of them from the shadows. Later that night, Lynn rides through the town again and stops at Jack's fancy car covered in red paint. She finds Jack dead in the passenger seat. According to Bullock, he was stabbed in the chest and then dragged to the car. Jones reports on the night's misadventures to Barnaby. I bet he left out that part about tipping the stripper. And they notice a mysterious scar on Jack's arm, same scar that Mark has. Lynn admits the paint could have been from Spud. When the detectives ask who might have wanted Jack dead, both Stacy and Mark are pretty clear. Everyone. He was hated and had been receiving death threats. Stacy also tells them to not trust Charlotte, Louise, or Mark because they had some kind of secret with Jack. Louise admits to the text but says she can't remember what it was about because she was off her face. She seems very concerned that this will cancel the wedding as well as their plans for a honeymoon and leaving town. Barnaby assures them that they can still have the wedding, but not to leave town. Mark asks Jones to be his new best man since his previous best man has a huge hole in his chest. Barnaby thinks it's a good idea so Jones can spy on them for him. Alyssa Bradley is giddy at Jack's death because she thinks this will stop the destruction of her home. Alyssa's son Patrick went missing 19 years ago, and she fears if her house is destroyed, he won't ever find his way back. She also thinks that this is a case of the sins of the father being laid on the son, since apparently Papa Purdy was the driver who killed Michael Wilson. Mark is still upset about this because even though his dad was exonerated, he developed a drinking problem and would beat Mark before he drove his car into a tree and died. It's the wedding day and everyone is getting ready. Charlotte tells Louise that with Jack dead, maybe they can come clean about everything. She also thinks Louise killed Jack because she saw them together. And she's shockingly cool with that. Mark, on the other hand, tells Charlotte they are keeping whatever secret they have. Alyssa approaches them and demands to know what they did to Patrick, but they deny anything. Stacy accuses the trio of murder as well. Honestly, I am so mad I didn't get an invite to this wedding because this seems like a fun crowd.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, that mysterious someone is still watching everything. The fingerprint report came back and there were only 3 sets in the entire house, the Wilsons and a third unidentified. Barnaby heads over to look around and finds a room upstairs that was kept locked. Inside is a photo album of Michael. He hears someone in the house and finds Spud and Lynn looking for her petition, which she lost. Spud has red paint all over his shoes, just like Jack's car. But he says Jack was alive when he wrecked the car and that he was making out with Louise. At the reception, Mark and Louise plan to escape town despite Barnaby's orders. Charlotte spots the mysterious watcher in a photo and tries to warn them, but when Jones approaches them, she distracts him with a dance. Mark and Louise have a fight on the dance floor and run off in separate directions. Louise runs into the garden where the mysterious watcher jumps out of the shadows. We cut to later in the hospital where we find out she has been stabbed and burned with a cigarette. She tells the detectives with her dying words that someone has come back from the dead. Tourist info. Well, this is Dunstan, and it's our only visit to Dunstan where Ben Jones grew up. It has 2 pubs and a bowling alley.
Oh, lots to do.
Yeah, plus a great hall for receptions. Hey, if you feel like you're being watched, that's just part of the Dunstan charm. A new road expansion will make getting there a lot easier as soon as we run over a few pesky obstacles. Run over the obstacles.
Yeah, don't run over the protesters.
No.
We do get a nice sense of the village in this one, which I like.
Yes. So this is a dark episode.
Oh, yeah.
There is not a lot of humor, and that ending is tragic.
Yeah, it really is. And we'll talk about it more in the second half, but I'm glad they don't end it with a domestic at home scene.
No, the ending is also very weird because it kind of plays into what Barnaby does the entire episode. All of this we're going to get into just a little bit. I want to call out the flashback scenes that we see in this episode are incredibly eerie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of great acting in this episode.
I agree. This is one where I can't think of anybody who stands out as far as not putting in a really good performance.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some that are just really terrific. And we'll talk about those when we get to the actors. But and I think this really elevates it.
The acting is what holds this episode together.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is, a lot of people kind of hide. It's, what do I want to say here?
There's not a lot of action to it.
No, there's not a lot of action to this one. It is really told through. This episode is all about watching.
Mm-hmm.
Barnaby does a lot of watching. The mysterious watcher. Charlotte is a photographer. It is about seeing through her lens and what she captures on there. So, watching is a big kind of symbol that runs through this whole episode.
And the culpability of people who stand by and let things happen.
Yes.
I also see some parallels with a couple of other episodes, Death Shadows in season 2 and a bit of Murder of Innocence in season 15, both of which deal with groups of children who do bad things and then have consequences when they are adults. And I think this really gets into the depiction of the past that Midsomer has. It plays with nostalgia because so many people go to it because they kind of categorize it as a cozy, and I don't think it's quite that, because it can be quite graphic. I mean, we have a stripper, which isn't normal, for cozies, but
for all the debate about whether or not Midsomer is a family show,
yeah,
there's a stripper in this episode, and one of our detectives tips her.
Yeah,
which is he should, because she's working.
She is working, and he, I'm glad he gave her a generous tip.
Hmm.
But anyway, the way it plays with this idea of the past, it's not a happy place. The past is often full of really bad things that happen. It doesn't idolize it the way a lot of people think it idolizes the past, because it's this whole quaint village thing, and we love the past and these little villages. It's like these, I mean, as Barnaby says, these villages are full of really horrible things that go on, both in the past and in the present. So it plays with that whole idea of nostalgia by not giving into it.
There's a lot of murder in
Yeah.
Midsummer.
There's incest.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird, dark stuff that happens in Midsummer, and of course that's going to affect kids. And of
Yeah.
course you're going to have some really dark seeds. If this was America, I think someone would say that Midsummer was just built on a giant indigenous person's burial ground,
Yeah.
and this is all cursed.
This is all cursed. Yeah. Maybe it was all done on a ancient Celtic burial ground, and that's why it's cursed.
There you go. How do we know it's not?
It may be.
The first half of this episode revolves around I would say is probably the world's most awkward wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Especially considering that the brother of the groom is murdered, a day before the wedding?
Yeah.
And they still go through with it.
Yeah. Well, it was booked.
Not getting that deposit back.
No.
Honestly, it's just like, can we still have the wedding? It's like, wow, you just, like, nobody liked this brother at all. It's like, can we still have this wedding? Yeah, sure. Go nuts. Makes you look guilty as heck. I don't care.
You kind of agree with Stacy that, yeah, I think these two people did murder Jack because they're off celebrating their wedding. I'm taking the girls home.
And he's marrying his brother's ex-wife.
Either ex-wife or ex-girlfriend. I'm not sure if they ever established, but it's still pretty creepy.
They never quite established it. They said ex, and that's like, it's. I feel like they said ex-wife at some point, but you're right. I can't remember it clearly. And I mean, they didn't even give Louise a last name.
Yeah, she's the only one who's a bit of a not quite as developed as the rest of the other characters.
Spud has a last name.
Yeah,
friggin' Spud has a last name.
Yeah,
Louise doesn't.
Yeah.
And then they invite the current wife to the hen night.
Yeah.
Why didn't Stacy just say, you know what? I got a headache.
Yeah.
I don't need to be here.
Yeah. The whole idea of head nights is funny. I mean, we have like bachelorette parties, but they tend to be a little different. When I was in England,
I'm going to tell you right now, in New York City, they are not. This is what bachelorette parties look like in New York City.
Oh, really? They do look like this now? Okay, because when I was 10 years ago, when I was in the UK, we saw some head nights, and they wear the crowns and the sashes and, funny little costumes on the bride and everything, and they all get drunk. I can't imagine getting that drunk before my wedding.
They do it here, and it's usually a couple days before.
Yeah.
I was not shocked by that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question. So all these, Jack, Louise, Charlotte, and Mark, they're all childhood friends of Joan's, right?
Yeah.
How does he not know about their secret?
Yeah, he seemed to be so friendly with them, especially Mark. They were talking about, oh yeah, he was my best friend for a while, but he didn't know that he was involved with this group of kids that basically committed an attempted murder. He didn't notice that they all basically slit their wrists and, had a secret that I think would have, kids can't keep secrets very well.
Yeah. Everyone seems to know about this. It's, again, Jones would have also known about the whole search for Patrick.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would assume he would have been one of the people. I was a little confused of why, he seems to be discovering all of this for the first time, if he's close enough with them to be the next in line for best man.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is something they could have developed a little bit more.
Yeah.
Jones's relationship with the group.
Or maybe it was a thing of where Mark was a former cop, which is a detail that just is kind of presented and then completely, it's a pretty specific detail that they just don't bother with ever.
Yeah.
So maybe it could have been one of these things where like he knew Charlotte but didn't really know them that well, and then I became really good friends with Mark when we were in academy together.
Mm-hmm.
I have a list of things that I feel like just get dropped in this episode, and
Mm-hmm.
this is one of them.
Yeah.
Jack is pretty evil,
Mm-hmm.
self-described,
Yeah.
but I respect that he knows it and he owns it. He's like, yeah, I'm evil.
Yeah. Matthew Flynn does a really great job with the role, but that line in particular for me stands out because of the way he just infuses just that simple phrase of acknowledgement with every ounce of self-loathing that he can muster up.
Yep.
Really, really marvelous little scene.
So Stacy didn't seem to be a terrible person. What did she love about Jack?
I don't know, and you wonder that with people you think are really horrible people, and you're like, how did this person get married, and why are they still married, and why has this person not been murdered yet? You just wonder how that person can tolerate it. Not to mention say that she loves that person. This isn't a Melania's in it for the money kind of thing. She's got her daughter. She seems to like their life.
I thought I gotta be honest, as much of a jerk that Jack was, and probably there's a lot of people happy at his death,
Mm-hmm.
leaving the R.I.P. wreath for his wife, that was rude.
Yeah, especially since she has 2 daughters there.
Yeah, that was just nasty.
Yeah.
What did you think of Joan's wedding speech?
I like that he actually did acknowledge that they had a tragedy. So it started off, addressing the elephant in the room, which I think, you have to do. But, it just kind of, them not telling him that Stacy had left with the bridesmaids, it was kind of like, yeah, I think at that point he was like, this is the worst moment of my life, and I can't wait for the speech to be over.
This is the worst moment of my life, and I work with Tom Barnaby.
Yeah. Who's rude and cranky in this one.
I've seen so many dead bodies. This is still the worst moment of my life.
Yeah.
The other big thing in the first half is this protest.
Mm-hmm.
What were they was it to stop the project or save the house?
It seemed a little unfocused. It looks like they can't stop the project completely. But if they can't stop but they wanted to save this house, but if they can't save the house, they can't stop the project. Or if they can't stop the project, they can't save the house. It's all kind of intertwined. But
didn't they like chain themselves to a tree?
Yeah. Yeah.
How would that stop them from destroying the house?
I guess it's all part of the property. Who knows? But it was a little, with them singing "We Shall Overcome" and everything. It was like, okay.
Well, Lynn at one point says this is a crime against humanity, and I'm like, let's take this down a notch. Like that's we're not talking a major landmark here. That house could use some work.
Yeah.
Not only does like Lynn kind of like with the whole is like over the top with the crimes against humanity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point where she like a switch seems to flip and she just goes off on Barnaby about like trying to infiltrate the protest group and the whole nine. Like I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah. She's been to too many protests in the 60s.
It was a character moment that just seemed massively odd.
It did seem to kind of fit her, though, because she tries to be the rational, reasonable, we're not going to commit any crimes kind of person. But that you kind of get the idea that when push comes to shove, that she'll be...
Oh, she covered up for Spud.
She would throw paint on a car.
Speaking of Spud, that scene where they were trying to like make him a viable suspect because he's digging a tunnel with just a big knife.
Yeah. Yeah.
That seems like that seems like a pretty hard way to dig a series of tunnels running through this town.
Yeah, it's not like in the Shawshank Redemption where you had a whole life sentence to dig a hole out of the prison.
Well, I mean, think about it this way. There's a tunnel, right? This tunnel system goes miles because that there's a tunnel from that house that's all the way to Hardwick Farm, which we are led to believe is so far away and scary that Alyssa was not going to let Patrick the child play
Hmm.
there.
Yeah.
That's like some like Vietnam level tunnel work.
Yeah, that's I mean, that is grade A gopher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was weird.
Yeah.
Since the protests seem to be about eminent domain or compulsory purchase, Eileen, you've got a history corner all about it.
I do. So we mentioned compulsory purchase in our last episode while discussing the village of Tyneham, which was evacuated during World War II to expand the Army training ground nearby, and then bought up by the Ministry of Defense in 1948 with a compulsory purchase order. For those of us in the US, this is basically the same as what we call eminent domain. The government, whether local, state, or federal, can purchase the land from the owner regardless of the property owner's desire for what is termed the common good, which can be any number of things. It has traditionally been used for infrastructure projects, though it can be used for larger projects such as airports, sports stadiums, or to redevelop areas of urban blight. This takes us to the concept of land ownership. Who ultimately owns the land? Humans didn't develop an idea of land ownership outside of tribal territories until they settled down to cultivate the land around 10,000 BCE during the first agricultural revolution, which we discussed when we talked about the history of beekeeping. Tribal and community property gave way to the idea of familial property. The Romans naturally had very sophisticated laws relating to land and property. The Romans brought those laws to the island of Great Britain, where they influenced the concept of land ownership. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the feudal system developed in the early Middle Ages, and most wealth was held in land, which was worked by serfs. When William the Conqueror claimed the crown of England, he also claimed all the land and compiled the Domesday Book to catalogue it, which we discussed in a previous episode. Estates were granted to lords loyal to the crown, and William began standardizing the feudal rules in England. In 1215, however, King John was forced to sign the Magna Carta, which, among many other rights spelled out, established that no one could be deprived of their land without due process of law. This right was later enshrined in the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. As land was wealth, there were really two types of people, those who had it and those who didn't. Those who did exploited the labor of those who didn't. The Catholic Church also owned vast land areas. However, after the Black Death wiped out a third of the population in the 14th century, the peasants found that they could demand better wages and more freedom. Land rights were complicated, though, and common lands have been open for grazing and farming and for walking, as we've discussed in earlier episodes. Compulsory purchase of those common lands became common under the Enclosure Act starting in 1604, mainly to benefit rich landowners. Cities also had both public and private lands, and land ownership led to vast disparities in wealth, as well as in tenements and slums. Landlords reaped the benefit of a rapidly urbanizing population during the Industrial Revolution, and railways and canals were built by private companies on land confiscated under compulsory purchase. Efforts to clean up cities in the early 1800s eventually led to the Public Health Act of 1875 and the Housing of the Working Class Act of 1885, both steps taken by the government because factory owners, landlords, and local governments did not want to spend the money to do things like clean up streets, which were basically open sewers. An example of a public project of the time was the embankment of the Thames River to control flooding, which displaced countless working-class people. The War Office took over a lot of land during World War I in order to train their armed forces in the new methods of warfare, especially tanks. This continued in World War II, as we discussed in our episode on The Village That Rose from the Dead. In the U.S., eminent domain laws were used to buy up land for Central Park in New York. Around 1,600 poor residents were displaced, including many farmers. One of the most stable African American settlements, Seneca Village, was also destroyed. Eminent domain was also employed to build the interstate highway system, generally through farmland, though it often destroyed many cities' historically black neighborhoods. Controversially, the laws have also been used lately for redevelopment rather than for public works, especially of so-called blighted areas, though the Supreme Court has affirmed that cities can seize private property through eminent domain if someone comes along with a more profitable use of the land, even if the property is in no way blighted and the project is not public use. Landowners have the right to be compensated for any land seized through compulsory purchase or eminent domain, generally at assessed market value. However, depending on the jurisdiction and any lease clauses, there may be no compensation given to tenants of seized properties who are forced to move. The legal process often takes so long that the designation that an area is blighted often becomes self-fulfilling, as investment in land and upkeep of standing properties often stop. Courts, at least in the U.S., have generally sided against the original property owners.
Got to eat the rich.
It's a very, very controversial subject. I mean, you think, yes, we do need some certain projects, like obviously flood control, but fair compensation is great, but at the most, tenants often just get moving expenses, and sometimes it takes years to be recompensed for that.
Yeah, it's you know what? I got nothing to add.
I looked at a lot of law pages for that one. It's
Yeah.
like crazy complicated.
Ugh. Should we do something more fun? Should we talk about cast highlights?
Oh, let's talk about let's talk about this really top-notch cast.
Yep. We're going to kick things off with Indra Ove, who played the Hot for Jones Charlotte Knight. Her first on-screen role was in the 1980 miniseries The Latchkey Kids. She's appeared in Interview with a Vampire, Holby City, The Fifth Element, Star Wars IX, The Rise of Skywalker, and Sex Education. Her father is the film director Horace Ove, who made a film called Pressure, which was the first British film written and directed by a black filmmaker and focusing on the lives and perspective of black characters. I just thought that was interesting because the film has recently been restored and just played here in New York City.
She is one of the first really prominent actors of color to appear in Midsomer.
Yes. And she gets to kiss Jones.
Yes.
Marion Bailey was Heartbroken Mom Alyssa Bradley. Now, movie buffs might know that Bailey is the longtime partner of celebrated filmmaker Mike Leigh and has appeared in many of his films, including Meantime, All or Nothing, Vera Drake, and Mr. Turner. She received a supporting actress nomination from the London Films Critics Circle for Turner. She also played the Queen Mother in seasons 3 and 4 of The Crown. Most recently, she has been in All the Light We Cannot See and This Is Going to Hurt. Kate Miles didn't get a last name Louise. She got her start as a TV producer before attending RADA for acting. She got her start with acting in an episode of Hustle and would go on to appear in Longford, The Work Experience, Family Tree, I Want My Wife Back, and Housebound. Now, in 2014, she did a spoof of TED Talks called The Secrets of Food Marketing that she put on YouTube, and it went viral, got over 6 million views. Ben Crompton was Human Gopher Spud. Now, he started as a comedian on such programs as Man, Stroke, Woman, and Ideal. He also appeared in Doctor Who, 49, Housewife, Clocking Off, and 102 Dalmatians. But you know what? Most people are going to probably recognize him from Game of Thrones, where he played Edison Tollett. Nia Roberts played Woman Who Makes Terrible Romantic Choices, Stacey Purdy. She's a Welsh actress who started as a child and attended the National Youth Theatre of Wales. Her big break came in the Welsh film Solomon a Gaynor in 1998, which was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the 72nd Academy Awards. She's appeared in both Welsh and English productions, including Snowcake, Patagonia, Doctor Who, Hidden, and The Steeltown Murders. Albert Welling was grieving father Ron Wilson. He made his stage debut at the National Youth Theatre production of Zigger Zagger. I just like the name of that. Zigger Zagger. That was in 1967. Since then, he appeared in Z-Cars, The Sweeney, Rumple of the Bailey, and A Touch of Frost. He played Hitler in the Let's Kill Hitler episode of Doctor Who, and most recently appeared in Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. By the way, no credit for the actress who played his wife. I mean, she didn't really have any lines.
No lines, no credit.
Just laid there.
Yep.
Louisa Connolly Burnham played the young Louise in the flashbacks. Now, she made her debut with this episode, but she's had a very prolific career. She would appear in the teen dramas Wolf Blood and House of Anubis, as well as Call the Midwife, Death in Paradise, and Vampire Academy. She directed a short film called The Call Center in 2020, and during the pandemic, she started a musical duo called Virons with James New. They released their debut EP called Couples Therapy last year. Jade Gold was young Charlie. This is her last acting credit after appearances in Holby City, Hotel Babylon, and Casualty. No real idea what she's up to now. Danny Hartfield played young Jack, and Alfie Adams was young Patrick in this episode. This is literally the only credit for either of them. I kind of imagine this episode might have killed their desire to act.
For our return visitors, we're going to start with Maggie Steed, who was the psychic protester Lynn Fox. We met her when we discussed Judgment Day, and she also appears in Schooled and Murdered. She first gained prominence as one of the only women in the late 70s alternative comedy scene in the UK, which is probably why she ended up appearing in 3 episodes of the cult comedy classic The Young Ones. She also appeared in Chewing Gum, Paddington 2, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, which was Heath Ledger's final film, and most recently in Fisherman's Friend and its sequel, Fisherman's Friends, One and All. Matthew Flynn was super chill nice guy Jack Purdy. We saw him go splat in Hidden Depths. He's a native Londoner whose first screen appearance was in Foyle's War. He's gone on to be in Lucan, Pride, Coronation Street, Emmerdale Farms, and most recently in Cobra, which is not a TV reboot of the Sylvester Stallone action classic. I think Classic's doing a lot of work there. Caroline Laskowska played young Mum in a flashback. We also saw her in Hidden Depths. She only has a handful of credits, and this episode of Midsomer was the last one for a long time until she did some voice work for the video game Anthem in 2019. She seems to do primarily voiceover work these days. Joseph Scatley was young Mark. He also appears in Murder of Innocent as young Daniel. Can we say typecast? He only appeared in a couple small roles in Snuffbox, Holby Blue, and Doctors, but it looks like he's still an actor in London.
According to his X profile, he says he will recite Shakespeare for food.
Well, so will I, but not as well. Nick Thomas Webster appeared uncredited as Road Protester. He's one of our frequent extras and has appeared in 14 episodes. And this episode also features our beloved Mayor of Midsomer, Chris Wilson, as an uncredited police officer. I have to say, it was nice to see so many police on the scene there.
Like all the police.
Like every police in
all the
ever.
police in Coston were either there or at the protest.
Now we have our first double as village stars this episode. First, we must high-five Sean Dooley as the duplicitous Mark Purdy. He's also a return visitor because he just appeared in season 24's Book of the Dead. Sorry to spoil that for you. He's a very popular character actor and one of Eric's favorites. He graduated from early roles on Coronation Street, EastEnders, and Casualty to meteor bits in the Red Rising trilogy, Misfits, and 5 Days. Most recently, he's been in Saltburn, which is you just have to watch that. Trust me. Criminal Record, The Stranger, and Mr. Bates versus the Post Office.
He really is one of my favorite kind of character actors. When I see him in something, I know that he, I can't say that the whole thing's going to be good, but I know he's going to be good in it. He is just a consistently strong character actor. He's fantastic in Criminal Record. That had Peter Capaldi and Cush Jumbo. Did a fantastic job as Purdy in this. He plays so many different emotions.
Yeah. And you're never, the more you go on, you're never quite sure if he's telling the truth or not.
Mm-hmm.
And his interrogation scenes are really fantastic.
Oh, it's great.
We also want to showcase Harry Peacock for his heartbreaking and frightening Patrick Bradley. He's appeared in Toast of London, The Kennedys, Far from the Madding Crowd, and most recently in Changing Ends. He comes from an acting family. His dad, Trevor Peacock, was a popular character actor who also appeared in Midsomer Murders. His half-brother Daniel Peacock is also in the biz. Harry's married to the actress Catherine Parkinson, who's not yet appeared on Midsomer Murders, but has a prolific career. You might know her from Humans or The IT Crowd.
He only really gets to be in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
His scenes are so good.
Oh.
So intense, so heartbreaking. It's funny, as I was looking him up online, and there was some Reddit discussion, or some Reddit reviews of this episode were complaining where they thought he was terrible, and I was like, did we watch the same episode?
Yeah, I thought he moved from being someone that you sympathize with so much to someone you're and kudos to Nettles for nailing this in his performance too, that you're kind of really terrified of, because
Mhm.
as someone who's been so isolated from the world, every reaction and everything he does is so on spec.
And he's having to play someone who's got both like a childlike innocence, has a speech defect. Also, I will say his voice is giving vague Boris Karloff. And then he wanted to me having. But oh my god, he really sells the tragic ending of this episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to be back with the second half of Left 4 Dead. And we're back. Let's talk about the second half of Left 4 Dead.
That's not him. Well, that's what we thought he might look like. Now, this was taken by Charlotte at your wedding. And this is what he does look like. Can't be. It can't. I know for certain that Patrick Bradley is dead.
The next day, Mark tells the detectives that the fight was not real, just a cover so they could escape to their honeymoon. He also claims that Louise told him about seeing Jack on hen night. When they ask him about Patrick Bradley, Mark tells them that when they were kids, Patrick followed them all one day when they went into the woods. But when the four of them decided to go to the river, Patrick went somewhere else and he was never seen again. But these deaths can't be the work of a returned Patrick. Why would he kill Louise and not see his own mother? Meanwhile, Jones visits Charlotte, who has the same scar on her arm that the others had. When Jones tries to ask her about Patrick, she kisses him. Barnaby visits Alyssa, who gives him photos of Patrick as a child. She is convinced that the four know what happened to her son. Barnaby uses a computer to digitally age up the photo to see what Patrick would look like today, and the result resembles Spud, who they can't seem to find a record of in their system. Stevens suggests they try the name Sam Taylor, and voila, they find his criminal record. Now they just need to find Spud, because he's hiding in a series of tunnels that reach out all over the Midsomer countryside. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Mark argue, with him becoming very aggressive about not revealing the truth. Later on, her studio is firebombed, and Charlotte is taken to the hospital, but not before she passes a camera memory card to Jones. On it, they find the photo of the mysterious watcher, this time with a visible face. They show the photo to Mark, who tells them it can't be Patrick, because he is certain Patrick is dead. He tells them the real story of what happened. When the four kids went off into the woods, Patrick tagged along. They went to the Hardwick farm, where they smoked and drank. Jack bullied Patrick, but when Patrick defended himself, Jack put a cigarette out on his arm, and then all four of them chased Patrick to a bridge. Jack pulled out a knife and made Patrick jump into the water, even though Patrick can't swim. When he splashed around, Jack held him under, killing him. Charlotte tells them that they need to hide the body, so they drop him and his bike down a well onto the farm. They knew that Alyssa had forbidden Patrick from going to the farm, so she would never think to look there. They made a pact to never tell anyone, cutting their wrists to bond them in blood. Jack would make them re-swear every year. Barnaby takes Mark to the farm where they find the well, but it's not Patrick inside. Hey, it's Spud, who's been stuck down there. They also find Patrick's bike, but Patrick is gone. Barnaby still can't crack this thing, but until he realizes there were some missing photos at the Wilsons. He heads back over there, not realizing there's someone else inside the house. He hears a noise and finds a hidden cellar, where he is knocked down by the mysterious watcher, who turns out to be Patrick Bradley, suffering from some kind of brain damage. Patrick seems unsure of what his real name is, and he starts to remember what happened to him that fateful day. So here's the reveal. So Mark didn't really tell the real story. He is, in fact, much more complicit than he said. He is the one that burnt Patrick with the cigarette. He is the one that led the chase, and he is the one that held Patrick under, not Jack. But Patrick wasn't dead. The fall left him injured, but he managed to crawl out of the well and was found by the Wilsons. Seeing him as a second chance after the loss of Michael, they kept him hidden in the house, becoming recluses. They told him that he was Michael and used his memories of the assault to keep him from venturing outside, telling him that the Outers wanted to kill him. However, the fiction collapsed when Patrick found Libby dying from an embolism. When Ron said they couldn't heal her, Patrick runs off into the locked room upstairs and discovers the photo album full of Michael's photos. Realizing they lied to him, he argues with Ron and accidentally kills him. He begins stalking the people who hurt him and killed Jack and Louise. Now, at this point, Patrick loses control and overpowers Barnaby. At the same time, Jones talks to Charlotte at the hospital, who expresses regret at her actions. She also mentions the secret cellar. So Jones races over to the Wilsons and finds Barnaby tied up. Realizing that Patrick must have stolen Lynn's petition, which would have had Alyssa's address, he rushes over there and finds him asleep in his old bed with Alyssa looking over him, finally reunited. Barnaby lets her have some more time with her son before taking him away. The episode ends with Barnaby watching the Bradley house being torn down, it finally serving its purpose of giving Patrick a place to return to. There's a lot here to unpack. So let's just start with the killer. It is revealed that Patrick is the killer. We don't really meet him until the last 20 minutes of the episode. I find this ending to be very weird and tragic, and I just kept thinking at the end, his mother is going to be destroyed.
Yeah, the one who you really feel for at the very end of this is Alyssa, because she's going to lose her son again.
It was like reunite that scene where she's just kind of lovely staring at him. And I just, Barnaby, I respected Barnaby's choice of just like, you know what, let's just give her some time.
Yeah.
And everyone else seems to respect that choice too. I thought it was a little weird. Again, they kind of rely on that idea that somehow people with brain damage or seem a little slower have freakish strength. Because we see basically Patrick just smashing everybody.
Yeah.
Like he's the Hulk.
Yeah. There's a bit of a Hulk smash.
Yeah. Like when he kills Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Ron wasn't a small dude. But again, well acted. Some really interesting lines coming. They really were creative in how they wrote Patrick's dialogue. Saying like, his dad fell down, crash bang wallop.
Yeah.
Like Jesus, I was born again, which is just like hauntingly sad. And then when he's talking about how he stalked Jack, he's like, he thought I was a shadow.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, the acting standpoint, really top notch. What did you think about the flashbacks, which was basically, I know what you did last summer?
Yeah. And as I pointed out, definitely a callback to
Murder by Innocence.
Death's Shadow. More Death's Shadow, because that had the 4 boys. Yeah. I think it ties back a lot to, and parallels what happened in Death's Shadow, though, that does result in a child's murder by 4 other children and who are being very careless as well.
So I have a question about the flashback. So as we see the flashback from Mark's perspective, and then we find out later from Patrick's perspective that, Mark was much more complicit. But there's a moment where, Charlotte was in the hospital talking to Jones, and she says that she wanted to come forward the day it happened.
Yeah.
Which is not what we see in the flashback. She is actually complicit in putting the body in the well.
Yeah.
In fact, it's her idea. So is that also Mark's lie? Or is Charlotte lying to kind of mitigate her own guilt? Like, how much of this is, basically, I guess it was like, how much of this flashback are we seeing is just, these flashbacks are all just Mark's perspective?
Yeah. And Mark, as we know at the end, is a liar. So, yeah, he easily passes off the basic attempted murder, what they thought was a murder of Patrick, to his brother, Jack. And, so it's very reasonable to assume that the whole hiding of the body, he would pawn off on Charlie.
I am curious because, and I think part of this becomes we don't really get the comeuppance at the end. We don't get to see him being confronted with the truth.
Yeah.
So I feel like we don't really understand is how much of this Mark is Mark really just 100% I'm lying to cover my own butt. And how much of this is I'm lying because I'm lying to myself because it's the only way I can function with the guilt of what I did.
Yeah. How much of a sociopath is he?
100%. Yeah. Or is he a sociopath? Now this kind of comes to something that I want to talk about with the ending. Because you and I disagree on the ending.
Yeah.
You think it works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it works.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of this stuff was. It feels like so much of the stuff in the first half just gets dropped, and it's led to a much bigger story that we don't get. And it almost is like I feel like they were leading to Mark was being set up as the killer, and then for some reason they switched it at the end to Patrick.
For me, it feels like it's even though the mysterious stalker tends not to be the killer, the fact that it was in this one for me works because you're getting, and I'm going to go back to high school English class, you're getting a Jane Eyre kind of reveal in this with the, crazy wife in the attic, but in here it's the disabled boy who's been kept in a basement. And you're seeing bits and pieces and you're getting teased about it. And all along it builds up and it builds up. Even the clue of the missing petition comes back at times where you're reminded, oh yeah, she had a petition, she dropped it. It wasn't with the flyers that were picked up, or maybe it was. I mean, she's blaming Barnaby for it, for keeping it to get the addresses. And then it comes back because that's how he finds his mother eventually. So to me, for me, it does work.
See, that I think were pieces that were in place, and I think the other thing is like, so number one, we don't actually see him kill Jack or Louise.
He does tell us in flashbacks that he does it, and we see that.
Well, number one, all that stuff we hear him say it. We don't actually see him stab anybody. In fact, we see him burn Louise.
Mm-hmm.
We never actually see him kill anybody except Ron. There's no actual. In fact, who firebombed Charlotte?
Oh, he did. I mean, because he's lurking outside.
We never actually see him lurking outside there. We see a hand going for the door, but we never actually see whose hand it was. And then the firebomb thing kind of goes through, which is, by the way, he's been hunting and stalking these people with like knives.
Mm-hmm.
Why all of a sudden is he doing a firebomb?
The firebomb seemed a bit out, and I assumed because he couldn't get into the house because she had locked the door. It was a glass door he could have easily broken in.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like they were like Mark. I can see sort of the thing of like Mark actually being the killer of basically because Jack and Louise did have enough. See, like some of this stuff makes me feel like maybe Sean Dooley, like they needed to do reshoots or something, or that maybe Sean Dooley came in and then all of a sudden maybe he got sick and he couldn't film. And like these things have tight turnaround times. These are not movie sets that can like be closed down for a period of time. So I'm kind of wondering because I feel like this was set up that Mark was really the killer. That part of this was to keep the secret that he couldn't hold on to, and also part of it because his brother was kind of a monster who bullied him and who was obviously like maybe there was really an affair still going on between him and Louise. Because all the scenes that we see of Jack and Louise, none of them involve Mark Purdy and could have been shot completely separately without him even being on the set. And that's why it feels to me like there's a lot of stuff that they're building towards where Mark was supposed to be the killer, and then something happened. And they're like, it's sort of the same thing when we were talking about when we talked about Talking to the Dead, of how, well, they've got this huge actor and it seems like he should be the one that's the killer, and then he just disappears for a period of time, and then we just like, he just has this weird off-camera death.
For me, it's you're supposed to think it's Mark, but it's not Mark. Because they do bring it up, and you're not sure if he's lying about the fight with Louise, because how would she have known about them getting together, but afterwards she kind of acts like they're meeting up, because she calls out to him when she hears the noise in the trees. For me, it works because it's the thread that ties everything together through it is Patrick and his revenge on these people, and he doesn't really completely understand what these people have done to him, in the context of who he is. He doesn't understand. He knows that these people did terrible things to him. He knows who they are. He knows that the dynamic is wrong with them because is supposed to be with Jack, not Mark. So he understands a lot of that from his childhood, but where he fits into it, he's not quite sure.
The problem with Patrick is there's you can have a certain amount of sympathy for him as someone who's like deeply
Hmm.
scarred,
Hmm.
but he if he is the killer of Louise,
Hmm.
he's he is escalating into a viciousness. He
Hmm.
is torturing Louise. He he is trying to burn alive Charlotte. Like he is
Hmm.
escalating into monstrous territory, which he he seems scared and like a little child, but he doesn't
Hmm.
seem monstrous. Mark, with the way there's that one scene where he is like almost threatening Charlotte, and then
Hmm.
Jones pops up and he's like, "Hey, buddy!"
Hmm.
Like Mark shows that he has the ability to switch
Yeah.
to mask great monstrousness, and
Yeah.
I also think that there's like the whole Michael Wilson story that is built that there's this weird thing about like Michael Wilson and his dad kind of killed him, and then the dad killed himself. That felt like there was supposed to be something more there,
Mm.
and it just felt like there was supposed to be something more.
I do think that there are things that could have been fleshed out a little bit more, like we talked about. I think Jones's relationship to the four of them was a little sketchy as far as the development was concerned. We don't know anything about Mark and Jack's mother, where she was. Nobody's parents are at this wedding.
Yeah,
Um,
the parents are gone.
yeah,
There's that weird like Charlotte says that she was best friends with Michael Wilson,
yeah,
which really like means nothing until like you get that little info drop at the end about like, oh,
mm,
they had a secret cellar. But
yeah,
they put so much into this episode that seemed it would have more importance
hmm,
than just straight like, if these are all red herrings, there's a lot of red herrings.
yeah,
In some ways it's like it's easier to just like, if you put this as a narrative of like Mark did it, Mark was actually involved with the death of Michael Wilson, or maybe the death of his father,
hmm,
and he, obviously more active in the death or in the attack of Patrick. That he maybe not aware that Patrick is attacking, like is running around or everything like that, but
hmm,
could easily have like, um, or that the Patrick stuff was like Patrick was watching, and Patrick could have been the one that they could have actually filmed it where Patrick saw Mark do the killing, and then maybe, like I said, Sean Dooley wasn't available. I
hmm,
don't know. It seemed to me like they make the ending tragic, but they also take some of that tragedy away by making Patrick's crimes, his murders, escalate into more of they're almost, as opposed to like, I'm scared, I need to defend myself, these become revenge and
hmm,
more torture, and like very torturing and kind of evil.
hmm.
And Patrick, like the Patrick that we see, didn't strike me as evil.
No, but there is an undercurrent of danger that he is portrayed with.
He's scared and he feels
Hmm.
threatened. He's been
Yeah,
taught that the outers are trying to kill him.
yeah,
But again, firebombing is much more of a of you're planning. Like firebombing is a like, you could make the argument that he gets worked up and kills both Jack and Louise.
hmm,
Firebombing requires planning.
hmm,
Like it's not like he's carrying like a bottle of flammable material on him at any, or like that. He is getting that, coming back with the full intent. I'm going to burn this woman alive.
yeah, yeah. And maybe that was Mark, and they just didn't tie that one together.
Which is quite
Yeah,
possible, because again,
yeah,
the fact that we don't get a comeuppance.
yeah. Because that is more of a I have to plan this kind of thing.
Hmm. They drop. There's a lot of stuff that gets dropped in this. So Lynn, like, there's a big deal in the first 20-30 minutes about her being a psychic, right?
Hmm.
That disappears.
Yeah.
It has absolutely no importance other than like, it's why I looked in on it. I'm like, but if you're going to set up a character as a psychic, that
Hmm.
really should have some kind of importance to the story.
Yeah. They could have left that out and just had her just be really
Yeah.
adamant about the project, and that's why she went. She violated I mean, the no trespassing signs and everything.
the search for the body made no like they said, well, they dropped the kid in the well at the Hardwick place because the mother would never think to look there. I was like, well, wait a minute. When they were searching for this kid, they would have searched everywhere. They would have searched the farm.
Well, there were 4 kids who may have said, "Oh, we searched the Hardwick farm."
But they didn't mention that.
But they didn't mention that, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's quite possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then it makes me think, like, wouldn't they have noticed that the body wasn't there?
Yeah.
Also, how is Spud stuck in a well that as a grown man, that a child with a massive head injury got out of just fine?
Yeah. Was he stuck in there, or was he just really just hiding?
But then he doesn't go back into the tunnel.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
he I think he's stuck there.
Yeah.
There is a lot of weird stuff in this ending that
Mhm.
just doesn't. If you want to go the concept of like tying something into like a nice pretty bow,
Yeah.
this is tying something into a big old knot that
Yeah.
that is really hard to untangle and doesn't really hold anything together.
Yeah.
But it worked for you.
It does work for me, I think, because the performances are strong, and I think the whole thread of Patrick that gets slowly revealed through it does come to a, I can see where maybe, the whole firebombing doesn't work for him to have done, but I do buy that he would have killed Jack and Louise. And I mean, she was laughing while he was being burned with a cigarette, and he saw that cigarette there, so he burned her. Yeah, I can see that.
So strange kill. Don't really have a strange kill. Does strange killer count?
Yeah, these are pretty straightforward. The first one is, just somebody getting pushed downstairs in a fit of rage. So more manslaughter than murder.
Let's jump straight into the detective work here. Why was Jones allowed to be a part of this case?
Well, as we've been learning, recusing just because you have a personal stake in something isn't necessarily done anymore.
Ba-dum-bum. But this is the police. They do have rules about you can't be personally involved in
Yeah.
the case, and this seems like he knows the victim, he knows the suspects, and while Barnaby seems to think that having your detective spy on them at the wedding seems to be 100% appropriate, he seems to be really angry at Jones
Yeah.
for just being involved in this. And I'm just like, you can tell him to not be a part of this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Tom is very cranky in this episode. He's mean to Jones for no reason other than Jones is saying hi to somebody. Then he uses that relationship for his own benefit.
Yeah, he seems to be, and there's a lot of like we said before, Barnaby is doing a lot of watching in this episode. Spying and watching is a motif of it's interesting that when Barnaby is the one that finds Patrick, because they're both watchers in this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I did like on this episode is that you get the sense that one of Barnaby's strengths as a detective is that he does notice things more than other people.
The way Patrick was watching is he's watching these people from the outside in, and it felt a lot like Barnaby was doing sort of the same thing, like watching Jones interact in the private life, and kind of like always watching people out of windows.
Yeah.
Even you get that last scene where he's watching the Bradley house go down, which had like this vague, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown sort of vibe with that house going down.
Yeah.
I liked that we got to see Stevens.
Yep.
Still just a WPC in this.
Mm-hmm.
But she gets she's the one that deciphers the whole Spud Tater Taylor.
Yeah. Didn't quite get that, but yeah.
No, it's Cockney rhyming slang, kind of. Taylor, Tater, Spud.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say Taylor is shirt?
I would think so, but yeah.
I liked Jones. We had a couple fun little Jones moments. Jones' theory on the killer is that Alyssa dresses up as Patrick for revenge.
Yeah.
Which is the plot of the first Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah.
Although, again, Alyssa killing Jack and Louise makes as much sense as anything else.
And also, it's Psycho, too.
Mm-hmm. Jones gets caught in the booby trap.
Mm-hmm.
Where the thing, kind of explodes on him. And I like that Lynn says, I told you it was booby trapped. He's like, no, you didn't.
Yep.
You just said, hey, I wouldn't go down there if I were you.
Yeah.
And then, Lynn was a complicated person.
Yes. Yeah.
We commented both it was nice to see Olive, Cost, and Petey sort of showing up to do this crime scene.
Yeah.
I felt bad for the officers whose job was to clean up all those flyers.
Yeah. In the overgrown yard, yeah.
Now, did you notice that one shot of the I guess the lab techs trying to do fingerprinting?
Mm.
And he looked like he was just painting the window gray. I even looked up, is that really how you put up, you dust for fingerprints? No. No, it's not. It was like, I'm putting on a heavy schmear.
Yep. Yep.
Not much in corner. Bullock, always nice to see him, but just there for the info.
Yep.
And then one of the strangest moments in home life I think we'll ever see.
Mm-hmm.
In helping Jones prep to be a best man, Joyce recounts how she did not like Tom's best man.
Yeah.
Because he kept calling her Jenny, which was Tom's ex's girlfriend's name.
Yeah.
And she was at the wedding.
Why was the ex-girlfriend at the wedding?
That's what I want to know. Why was Joyce cool with that?
I will say it did bring out the only smile in John Nettles in this whole episode when he reaffirmed that he did marry the right one, and he gave her that reassuring smile.
Well, we all know he married the right one, except for cooking. But it was like, I want to know what was going on at that wedding.
Another wedding we would have liked to have been invited to.
Yes.
Just for the gossip.
I know. It'd just be like, did you see? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Also, I loved the headshot they showed of Cully. Like, I guess Cully's new headshot, which was literally just a still from the show. And it just seemed to show Cully both confused and surprised. It seemed like the headshot was like they took the headshot of, like, hey, Cully. And she turned and went, what? And then they took the photo. I don't even know why they put that in there.
It was a rather tenuous clue. Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts on Left 4 Dead.
Again, I think this succeeds because of the acting more than the writing and the plotting. I think it's one of the best acted episodes, but I think and it does have the tragedy that comes with the reveal and what happened. Again, it echoes back to Death's Shadow, which also had a very tragic ending with revenge over something, over what Careless Boys did, many, many years before. And that justice does eventually come. But it's very sad and it's very tragic.
I agree with you that the acting is what makes this, that the acting kind of powers through everything else in this episode. I think I think we've discussed the acting is marvelous in this. I really liked this episode until like the last 20 minutes. And then the last 20 minutes, it's just like, this episode has a lot of spinning plates. And it's kind of like the last 20 minutes, you're like, people like to watch plates break. And it just, there's so many loose ends. There's so many things that don't quite work. The end is, while this is a really sad and tragic ending, it almost isn't earned. And it almost is, it almost feels like like I said, to me, this feels like something where they had to rewrite the ending and they couldn't refilm everything and they couldn't put all the pieces together perfectly. So they just said, the heck with it. And we're just going to jam them as best we can and then hope that no one notices.
Yeah. I do think a lot of things could have been fleshed out better, as we've discussed, and some things that kind of weren't necessary that could have been set aside to flesh out those things better. I think there was a missed opportunity to really have Jones's childhood be part of this, or at least his childhood friendships or his friendship with Mark and Charlotte, because he obviously knew these people, and we don't really get that. I mean, he.
There's a lot of stuff with this episode that could like 50% of these loose ends could have
Mhm.
been handled with either one or two less lines or one or
Mhm.
two more lines.
Yeah.
Just to be like, oh, that clarifies that. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we take that away and it doesn't add anything.
Yeah.
I think it just when you get down to like the central like who done it, like I said, I get the sort of the beautiful tragedy of making Patrick the killer, but again, for my money, his actions become so bloody vengeance that it takes away from the tragedy.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's a monster. He's
Yeah.
kind of just become a monster, and once you're firebombing people,
Yeah.
and again, they could have easily, as I said, they could have easily made the firebomb Mark.
Yeah.
Like if they had made the firebomber Mark, I think that would have helped the ending by almost half.
Yeah. I think that would have clarified a lot of things because I just assumed it was Patrick, but it doesn't make sense for him to do it because that would have been too premeditated. Where would he have gotten the supplies? Mark would have easily have gotten the supplies much easier than Patrick would have.
That's exactly it. It's like,
Yeah.
or have show like him as a child with Ron learning how to blow stuff up.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there's so much to really like in this episode. This is one of those ones that, again, this is eerier than a lot of the ones that are supposed to be eerie.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good for the first part of it, and then, like I said, for me, I guess it really comes down to like how much you're willing to, how much of like these loose ends like you're willing to let
Mm-hmm.
go by.
Yeah.
And for me, I guess there was like a couple too many, and for you, you may have a higher tolerance for that.
No, and usually I don't, but for this, I think if they had resolved that the firebombing, was it Mark, was it Patrick, and made it Mark because that made more sense. Especially if we get that reveal at the end when Charlotte is talking to Jones at the end, which is a very nice scene, and Ben Jones does a really lovely understated job there. That maybe she mentions that Mark had done the firebombing. That would have been a good clue.
I also, I will also say that if Mark had actually, in his interrogation, actually had told the truth,
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have bought Patrick as the killer.
Mm.
I think because he's still lying about it,
Yeah.
and when we see the truth, he is so vicious.
Yeah.
And then the viciousness of the murders,
Yeah.
we know he's capable of such viciousness.
Yeah.
I think if we had seen that truth, I think everything would have worked better that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of feel like maybe Sean Dooley got food poisoning or something, or he got really sick, or something happened and he had to leave. Because it just feels like they're like, why didn't we get to see him arrested?
Yeah.
So
yeah, Ben arresting him would have been nice to see that. I do appreciate that we did not get after all the tragedy and everything, and Tom sitting by the fire, we did not go to a home scene that was kind of jokey and stuff. That it immediately went to the destruction of the house at that final scene, because basically that's what this all was. It was all about destruction.
And you know what? I didn't even realize it till you just said it first. Like, they should have given us a scene of Jones confronting Mark, his best friend.
Yeah.
We know these guys would have been a really incredible scene.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't get it.
Yeah. And Jason Hughes would have knocked it out of the park. Yeah.
I know. And this was like we're really good friends, and like, how could you do this? How could you lie to me? And it's just like, it would have been there's stuff missing.
Yeah.
There's some really weird stuff missing.
Yeah.
Which, Mars for me is just such an endings are hard. It's hard to stick the landing.
Yeah.
But man, this is like a picture perfect Olympics gymnastic sequence, and it's like and then they just like land on their ass.
I wouldn't say they landed on their ass. I just think they took a massive step.
They took a few massive steps.
Come on. I will, for me, this is This could have been a great episode, but for me, it's a good episode.
I think I would chalk up to it's a good episode. If they had fixed the ending, it would be a great one. So
Yeah.
Well, we kind of came around to agreeing at the end.
Yeah, we did agree at the end, yeah.
Well, that's everything we wanted to talk about. If you have anything you want to discuss about Left 4 Dead or Midsomer Murders in general, please feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. If you want us to use the email in the show, say so in your email. We are also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook and Instagram and Threads. We're also Welcome to Midsomer on YouTube, where we've been uploading our old episodes. We're getting such a great response. Thank you to all the people that have been discovering us on YouTube. Please follow us on all these places. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to us or rating and reviewing us on iTunes. It really helps people find us. Also, tell all your friends about us. We'll be back soon with a new episode. We hope you will all join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you all for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, keeping someone in your basement can be murder.
And usually is.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act fair use exemption or criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space. Jack sees Lynn and fellow protester Spud. Sorry, that's just that name.
Matthew Flynn was super chill, nice guy Jack Purdy. We saw him go splat in Hidden Depths. I gotta start that over with. Okay.